Hi, I'm comedian Lunga Chuka the Energizer Funny, streaming live with my special guest on the Price of Fame podcast. We feature entertainment professionals on the show and find out what sacrifices were made to reach their level of success. Look forward to learning about how our guests have overcome mental health challenges, achieved success breakthroughs, what you need to know about the industry, and how you know when you actually have a talent that needs to be shared with the world. Take these episodes as your personal mentorship guidance on how to be a successful entertainer. We chat to those who have made it in South Africa and abroad. Let's make the SA entertainment industry the most supported by locals, because local talent is liquor talent. Subscribe now to keep up to date. You can also find us on all social platforms. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Price of Fame. This is episode 27, season 2. My name is Lunga Chuka, and I'll be your host as usual. As always, that's where you'll find me. And tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is a lawyer, actress, international fashion model, activist, and as well as an advocate for diversity. She is well embraced. She's well embraced in who she is, and she's pushing the boundaries when it comes to conventional beauty standards. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the screen, Miss Thando Hopa.
Hello, Molweni Dumelang Sanbonani. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for having me on your show, Lungs.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on The Price of Fame. It's such an honor to have you here. And all of this amazing things that you've been doing and standing up for people and all of this and being a voice for so many people, it's such an honor to have you here and to get to know who's the person behind all of this amazingness. So let's get into the story, and hopefully they can all be inspired by your journey. So that's what we're looking forward to.
Thank you.
How are you this evening? Let's start with that.
Hot, very hot. I think there's this immense heat wave, and I'm really feeling it.
Everyone who's tuned in, where exactly are you located right now? Where are you tuning from, and what is the area like?
Okay, so I'm in Walkerville. It's a very farm-like area. It's that place that conveniently is in Joburg, but nobody knows. And if you actually Google it, we're called a village. But it's actually, it's close enough to everything I need, but it's quiet enough to just, be away from everything else. So yeah.
Yeah. And what's your current significance for the place now? Is this where you grew up, or is this where you're living now, or you're kind of there just for work, or what's happening? How did you find yourself in Walkerville?
So how I find myself in Walkerville is, first of all, it's where I grew up. But secondly, I am a new mother. And there's something in Sesotho that's called Hubea Setswetsi, which means that Hubea Setswetsi, Motswetsi is a person who has just birthed. And Hubea Setswetsi is when somebody takes care of the person who has just birthed. And my mother, Hubea Setswetsi, so she is kind of teaching me how to mother. And that is why I find myself here at home.
That's very interesting because, just in general conversation, people always nobody teaches you how to be parents. Nobody, you just learn on the job. So it's very interesting to know that there's a traditional way that you can actually go back home and, and then you get the jewels and the guidance from your mother. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No, I can tell you young motherhood is I actually just posted something on it right now. It's like it's an intense initiation period, and you almost need the person who has birthed before you to literally teach you how to keep this little person alive until you are well capable of doing it yourself. But yeah, no, I think it's a very powerful tradition, and I think that it's something that is best done by all the maternal energies that best care and love you, yeah, so I hope it's something that we keep for a very long time within our cultures.
And how long is the period that you're supposed to spend with your mother for her teaching you all the ways before you finally like, okay, I got it from here now, and then you move on?
Every family is actually quite different. It can be 3 months is generally the period that, or it could be 6 months. But I think in a capitalist world, 6 months becomes quite difficult to do that. But 3 months, you're almost considered to culturally have healed, or not even your body has healed, and your child is considered sort of strong enough to go out into the world. In fact, you're almost quarantined, for lack of a better word, or incubated. And not everybody can actually just come through and see you. Very specific people within your family who are very close can come and see you. It's almost like a sacred time. It's treated as a sacred time. So yes, and I think also I really did incubate myself. I did. This is one of the very first times actually I'm quite out in public for, in terms of like my work stuff. I've been doing like work privately, but publicly, this is actually my first public appearance in essence.
I hope this is not like going against what you're supposed to be doing, when you go in.
No, 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 no. It's time now. It's time. It's time. It's
Okay,
time.
okay,
And it's so funny. You think like these things are so old and so outdated, and then when you go through it, you understand that that DNA that culture carries, why our ancestors did certain things the way they did, and those things are not archaic. They're actually very useful tools still today. And I think that young mothers need to be mothered. I think we need to be mothered mothers. So yeah.
wow, that's so interesting. And I mean, it sounds like a mother to daughter kind of process, Is the husband necessary, that kind of thing? Can they be part of this whole thing, Can they be
Yes,
there in
your
support, or
husband can
is it?
be, but not all families like are amenable to that. Some families only kind of really get the father in 3 months later, which I don't advise. Or else I think your partner won't really understand the depth of what it is to go through like the early stages, like newborn stage, of a child, which is it's intense, and it's intense. And I think it's important that you have your partner as present as possible. But I think with us, my partner was present, but it kind of really just depends with what your family kind of, yeah, how they view these things. But yeah, I would suggest that you have your partner present. I'd say incubate with your partner as present as he can be. But I also think it's very interesting that in our structural process of motherhood and capitalism, maternity leave, for instance, is 4 months, but paternity leave is 10 days. So structurally, you see that it basically says that mothers need to take care of children and fathers can go off and not really raise children, because if you structurally place paternity leave for 10 days, I think it's quite a structural message, that's a bit patriarchal, but my point really is that fathers need to be very present in raising little children.
Very true. Speaking of which, is there actually a male's version of this whole thing, of this process, where maybe the male can go spend some time with the father and learn from the father, how to be I don't know, a present
Okay,
father?
I'm not going to come in as a cultural expert, but as far as I know, no, 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 no. There isn't a male process. It's very female centric, because I guess your body is trying to adapt to this new life, after you've given birth. Physically, whether you do a cesarean, whether you do a natural birth, physically your body is adapting, and physically your body has changed in one way or another. And also your old self and your new self, you have to negotiate that process and reconcile yourself with who you are now as opposed to who you were 9 months before. And I think that becomes a deeper process for women, because the expectations of motherhood, as well as just, for instance, if you're breastfeeding, there is a limitation on your bodily autonomy because you're almost on call all the time, every night. It's different. I suppose if you're formula feeding, there might be nuances there that are different. But I think if you're breastfeeding, there's this link towards your child, and you almost need somebody who has walked through that process to usher you into this very different way of being, because it's not just a psychological, it's literally a bodily autonomy, reworking of yourself. And yeah, I think that you definitely, you would need a great deal of mentorship in terms of that. In terms of fathers, I do accept truly that it's a significant period, but I do think that it holds far more of a physical significance for women, aligned with the psychological, but also it has a very physical impact on you.
I mean, like it's a whole, like you said, the 9 months.
Okay, before. I did not. This is not what we came to talk about my career, not my motherhood. So.
The price of it. This is everything else besides the glitz and the glass. We try to get the real person, because we want to build that respect for who you are, especially for those people who feel like they opinion on what we do and what in this industry, so like once they learn the reality and the essence of who we are, where we come from, what are our stories and what has made us who we are, that's when they truly relate to us and give us more appreciation and respect. So that's why we're going with that angle. But yeah, we won't go too deep, but we'll go nice and deep. But that's basically the conversations that we have on the Price of Fame. But interesting enough, upon my research, I checked out the African Fashion Legacy Project, and I love what you shared there in terms of the sesheshwe material and the clothing and all of that. And it would really just make me so happy. It would be an honor for the Price of Fame if you could please share that history on this platform as well, because we've been loving this clothing. We appreciate it so much. We don't really know the history of it. And when you shared the history, I was like, my mind was blown. So please do us that honor and share us the history of this material.
So what I did is I did a project that looked at African fabric sort of working as a historical document. And, I researched African fabric, different kinds of African fabric, and I themed it. And the first one I started with is what I'd like to call transcontinental fabric. And the reason why I called it transcontinental fabric is because it's a fabric that moved from continents and it almost imprinted itself into different cultures. So something like sesheshwe, actually, like the craft of indigo fabric is something that was birthed in North Africa and India. Actually, it's part of the reason why India got its name. But colonization stuff. But anyway, point being is that the Dutch learned how to make indigo through their voyages in India, and then eventually the Dutch created this fabric called blauwdruk. It moved into the Germans, and but the Germans also actually call it blauwdruk. If you look at blauwdruk, it's exactly the same thing as sesheshwe. And what happened is that during trade and during sort of the initial stages of I'll say colonization, you had this interaction of people sort of just trading fabrics and trading a whole host of things. And then the French gifted King Moshoeshoe this fabric called blauwdruk, and the people of Lesotho actually kind of reinterpreted or sort of owned, culturally owned, and created a different form of ownership with regards to this fabric, because it was no longer German fabric. They integrated this fabric into their lives, into ceremonies, and they indigenized the fabric in essence. And then they called it Sishwesh. And now if you look at it, it has a completely different cultural identity to the blowdruk, when it's actually the exact same fabric. So I think it was quite interesting. And so I went into this mode where I wanted to tell the story, or many stories, about African fabric, being a historical document, but also part of it is I wanted to ensure that underrepresented groups hold the story and lead the story. So whether it is, a woman with albinism, or women with disabilities of different kinds, or, whatever, dark-skinned Muslim woman who's in South Africa, or whatever the case may be. But I was looking for intentionally, structurally underrepresented stories and underrepresented bodies, because a great deal of the time when you're having sort of these narratives put forward, people who are underrepresented are not seen as part and parcel of what represents Africa and African heritage. So and that's kind of the whole philosophy of AFL.
Wow, that's so cool. Like, it's so crazy because when you're telling the story now, it sounded like Africa was the last place that it touched, and you think that it started in Africa and went to all these other places. If you were to find it everywhere else, if you were to see it in Germany, you'd be like, oh, that's an African thing. You wouldn't be
Exactly.
like,
Actually, it's actually quite interesting that it's called African print, and we do have indigenous material that, like, we literally, because more so, you see that a lot in West Africa. West Africa had a high weaving culture, but you also, I think, at that time trade was quite fluid, and people were learning and borrowing from each other in ways that was innovative. Not, Sishweshwe is something that sort of the culture took upon itself as because of trade, not because of power. It wasn't something that was imposed on a people like many of the other things that are, for instance, English is something that was imposed on us. But something like Sishweshwe had a far more fluid, innovative rhythm to it. And I think that is the reason why the Basotho could take it and reinterpret it as their own, because the engagement was not one of power when they took it upon themselves. So yeah, I think that's quite I think it's quite an interesting thing about cultures and exchanges, and yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
back in the day, way back in the day, like, exchanging was a huge thing amongst people and cultures. We used to exchange and trade before we had businesses and own business, things like that. Like, this people would specialize in this, we would specialize in this, and we would trade, and that's how it used to, and that's how we would intertwine with our cultures, with food, spices, clothing,
Yes,
and everything.
definitely. Yes.
So, but now a completely different story. And what I want to know is, if you were to go to Germany right now, is it Seshwe everywhere, or would you have to refer to it as Blauwdruk, like as what the previous name is,
You
or
definitely have to. It's definitely still called Blauwdruk, and I think it's quite interesting because I think even in terms of the United Nations, it's considered protected heritage, but it isn't weaved into sort of the significant cultural fabric of Germany. It's almost you'll see it in art shops, or so it's almost kind of seen as an art piece in history, but it isn't woven within the meaning of culture. The way you have Sishweshwe, when you get married, you know that you're gonna wear Sishweshwe. It's different identities altogether, which is quite interesting. I would, speak to some of my German friends, and they'd say, "Oh, I learned about Blauwdruk in school." So it tells you that it's almost seen as a craft and an art piece that meant something in history, but it's not woven within the fabric of their culture. In modern day Germany, at least that's my understanding. If there's someone from Germany who has a different knowledge, I'm very, very open to learning about that. But that was what I've sort of deciphered from everything.
Like Thando, just in this few minutes, I mean, you've been sharing so much rich history and just like a little bit from who you are, and everything. But please tell us in your own words, who is Thando? Tell her where'd you come? I know we know a little bit where you come from, but tell us about the elements and the things that make you who you are.
So I grew up in Lenasia South, and Lenasia South is multicultural. But also, I think, I grew up in Lenasia South at a time when we were sort of weaning ourselves out of the apartheid structure and the Group Areas Acts and all of that. And I was going into Lenasia South, where we were a Black family and we were quite a minority because it was considered an Indian township. And it was lovely because you'd go to school and in Christmas, not Christmas, but what do you call this? Easter, you'd have a holiday. Eid, you'd have a holiday. Diwali, you'd have a holiday. So so it was quite interesting. I would be learning Zulu and Tamil. I can't speak Tamil now, but but it was really kind of, it was a multicultural community. And and I think I grew up having my grandmother really raise me. My mother was a filmmaker. She traveled a lot. My father, an engineer. And I think all of those things sort of crafted who I was. My mother, it's very interesting now because, these things matter to me so much now. But my grandmother used to sing to me these nursery rhymes and these lullabies that carried Basotho heritage with it. And now it's something I can pass on to my daughter. But I didn't realize the gift that she was giving me through oral tradition and how rare that gift actually was. I only realized it as I grew older. But yeah, and so I kind of, that is really the environment that I grew up in, and I suppose that's the more positive lens. And of course, from a negative lens, having growing up in a largely I'll say, I don't like saying this word. I say it still, but I don't like saying it because I just think it's extremely, there's a misconception about what pigment is. But I grew up in a pigmented society, and I was sort of, considered as a person who has little to no pigment. And I was the only person who looked the way that I did everywhere I went. And so that kind of created this conflict within myself and within society in terms of how I was expected to look, because I was not considered Black in any of its permissible shades. So even the lightest Black person, I was not looking like that. And so, yeah. So I think it's just, it was an interesting thing because I was sort of, at the age of 4 or 5, I started understanding that I was, just by existing, I was an ideological conflict to many people and to the society that I was born in. So yeah, I think that came with its own challenges, but also it crafted, all of these things crafted who I was. My parents, my grandmother, and the pushback that I had from society, all of them constructed who I am.
It's so amazing because there's something like myself and my part, we've been on our healing journey now for quite some time, and what we've realized with our upbringing that was so challenging and all of that, we realized those things were all the catalyst to get us to where we are today, just and now we are activists for things that we've been through, so like you saying, you realize at the fall that something is different, that people view you differently, and there's some difference, and you're going to get some challenges, are witnessing some challenges. And for a long time, that was like heavy for you, but now it's become actually something of a strength, where you speak for people who are experiencing something the same, where you can give them power and where they can look up to you and see you as a great example, so it's amazing, like, to see, what our pain and our struggles, what actually it teaches us in some kind of way.
I think.
Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, we as, you know, in terms of the bodies that we carry, those bodies generally carry a lot of, you know, experiences that are shared. Albinism has a shared experience, blackness has a shared experience, womanhood has a shared experience, and I suppose motherhood is now a part of me that has a shared experience. But I also think that, you know, there's a very interesting quote that I think really conscientized me, and it was by Arundhati Roy, and she said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember it properly, but she says, there's no such thing as the voiceless, there is the deliberately unheard or preferably ignored, something like that. And I think, you know, one thing that you start realizing, and also when you are in a marginalized group, it's not that you don't have a voice, it's that you're not given the platform to speak. And that, you know, even as we stand, you and I, we can share our experiences and shed light on experiences that people would not normally see, but we actually cannot speak on behalf of our groups, because everybody within their individual experience, they do have a voice. It's just that the way society is structured, it doesn't allow them to speak, but they are speaking. It just doesn't allow them to be heard, you know. So yeah, I think it's quite, yeah, I think for me, it really kind of shifted how I see my position in society. I don't know if that makes sense.
Fully. I love the perspective. I love that perspective. And from speaking of shifting, I mean, like you studied law, you're into law and all of those things, and then completely into another industry, modeling. You know, what
Yeah.
inspired you to like just, you know what, I'm fabulous. Let me go that direction as well.
You know, it's quite interesting because I mean, I was and I love how you do that, because I think when I went into modeling, that was the concept of my body, or a body like mine, being seen in the, you know, in the expression of beauty, was not, it was not normalized, you know. And so when I went into modeling, I went into it as a very political decision, actually, not so much as the interest in the glitz and glam. It was because, you know, I always say that modeling and being a prosecutor, law, and the media business, you're in the business of representation. And I
Yeah.
went into it particularly because I understood that representation was important, and I understood that the representation that, you know, was attached to people who have bodies like mine was injured, and that we had a lot of repetitive, negative, and harmful representations. And I was trying to curb that, but I have to admit that in that process, I made my own mistakes, and I learned the hard way that I was actually in some ways reinforcing negative representation. And but you know, they always say that life is a process of adjustments, and that's kind of what you do. You learn, and you're like, okay, maybe this was not working out too well, and you try and do better. And so it's been a very studious process for me too. But yeah, basically, it was a very political decision to go into modeling.
Well, lots of love and respect for you for actually moving into something in an industry for other people, or for, you know, for standing up for people, and also just to like bring some awareness to another platform, instead of like other people be like, because it could be such a what's the word I'm saying, it can make it, because it's such a, that industry can make you kind of like full of yourself, because they focus on the body. You have to focus on yourself and always feel that you're thinking, tell yourself that I'm amazing, you need to work. So it can kind of like really get you like self, you know, self in your, all in your head. But like you went into that industry with a completely different viewpoint of view,
Mm,
you know. You I want to actually make a stand and actually want to bring this awareness to this platform as well, you know. I'm
mm.
here to make noise. And was there
Yeah.
ever, was it a conflict of interest with like some of the jobs maybe that came to you as a model, where you were like, you know what, as a lawyer I can't do this, but like I would really love to do this, but as a lawyer, you know, it kind of like my image, you know, I have to worry about my image. Did you ever have any kind of opportunity that you had to consider because you're a lawyer, you know, you can't do it?
No, not because I was a lawyer, but I think one of the difficulties that I experienced is trying to understand my ideas of sexuality. To really, you know, I felt this constant conflict in terms of expressing bodily sovereignty and freedom in terms of sexuality and sensuality, or am I commodifying my body, and am I sort of reinforcing the issues of the female body being exploited, and that power dynamic where our bodies are used as commodities to just, you know, through a male patriarchal lens. Because, you know, I was watching some videos a while ago, and, you know, it was Umemulo, and there was this young woman who was dancing and her breasts were out, and she was dancing with other women around her. And, you know, like she was Begakita and doing all of that. And she just, like, I thought it looked absolutely beautiful, but not in a way that is presented through commodification. And when I went into the media industry, that constant battle of, am I commodifying this? Am I reinforcing the issues of exploitation? Or am I actually enhancing bodily sovereignty and bodily freedom? That was always a conflict, you know. And so, yeah, I think that was the conflict of interest, for lack of a better word, because it's almost like you're right either way, really. I think it just depends on the intention of the work. And I did not find partnerships where I felt truly comfortable and truly authentic in saying that this partnership, if I express my sensuality through this project, it would be done for sovereignty and freedom. I felt like there was sort of a layer of exploitation and an expectation for me, because I was a model. There's an expectation that my sensuality needs to be expressed through somebody else's eyes. So yeah.
I think it's safe to say, and I'm gonna go ahead and say that you probably consider yourself as an empath, right? You know, because
yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Oh, and I know, like, there's some good qualities of being an empath, you know, because we're able to understand, we're able to relate, we're able to even translate, you know, something to people who can't understand. You know, we can sometimes be the middleman and all of that. But also, there's a great deal of a lot of mental health and a lot of pressure and overthinking and all of that. What are some of the techniques that you do to keep yourself in a good space of mental health?
I think it's practicing the art of boundaries. That's the first thing, you know. I think it's very difficult for me. I always find confrontations really exhausting. I'm not like one of those people who confrontation like really riles them up. For me, it really exhausts me to go into confrontation. I literally have to will myself. Sometimes I literally count to 10 and say, hey, say what's on your mind, you know, like. So I think that because that's generally an exhausting process for me. So boundary setting generally is not an easy thing for me. But when I do it, I find that there is a burden and the lightness that I feel once it's done. Because it's a matter of really pouring into yourself. And I think it's an act of self-love to have healthy boundaries. And so I literally kind of and practice that. And I have to admit that I do waver sometimes. And so, yeah, so it's just being an empath. You almost have to know what is within your capacity to carry. My friend says to me a lot, she says, I am a limited resource, you know. And I think that's the things that you have to admit, you're a limited resource. You cannot expand yourself constantly into other people's emotions and lives. Or else you really kind of do find yourself that, like, you find yourself running out, and then you become a lesser version of yourself, even to other people, and a less kind version and a more resentful version of yourself, only because you didn't do the work to take care of yourself, you know. So I think boundary setting is something that it's a laborious practice, because I'm constantly learning how to harness and mold it. I think also I just try to surround myself with tribe, you know, people who you can be with, and they receive you fully. They receive you at your highest and at your lowest, and in every form you come in, whether you are completely fully fledged or you're broken. And when they receive you in that sense, you know, they still see you as this most beautiful, wholesome creature. And those people I call tribe, because I feel safe with no matter what. And yeah, so I think I also just I keep tribe around. And I think also just one last thing I would say is perspective. I let things cool down, and I always kind of, one of my prayers, and my spiritual life is quite complex, so it's not as clearly defined as most people. But I sort of pray for resilience. I pray for the art of resilience, because there are many things that you can ask of people. There are many things that you can even ask of a deity. And those things may not necessarily manifest, but one thing that you can always count on is resilience. It is your ability to be resilient. And that's what I constantly ask myself to build on. And, you know, a lot of the times sometimes what gives you resilience is a change of perspective. Sometimes that's all you really need, to just look at the same situation that you've looked at, but look at it differently in a way that's more enabling and progressive to you, for you to get through the next day and the next day, until you start moving into the rhythm of the days, and the days stop feeling as hard, you know. So yeah. You just went so quiet. Are you still there?
Yeah, I love that. And are, are you there? I don't know what's happening with the connection, but we're back. You know, we want to load shed soon, so I'm not going to keep it too long. I'm not going to keep it too long. So yeah, let's respect that. Let's respect your boundaries and respect the load shedding boundaries that we on us.
Yeah.
This load shedding boundaries. I know, I love that, and I hate confrontation. Like, I mean, I feel like I do so bad. Like, I get what I'm really thinking, and my tone is out of the space and everything. You know, I don't communicate very well what I'm really thinking and feeling when it comes to confrontation. You know, especially if the person is responding in a different way. You know, you're not responding in a way that you are listening to me. So I get like, yeah. So I hate confrontation at all. I always try to, like, you know, always patience, always show patience or whatever, or find the time to like relay the message. But sometimes you have to like actually stand up in the moment and, you know, set things straight, because people can take advantage of you. So confrontation. But Thando, please tell me, what I know you come across as someone, you know, who knows that you are this planet to do something. You know, you have a purpose, you live life purposefully. You know, you every move that you make, the way that you've set your path, everything has a purpose. And what would you like your legacy to be? What would you want people to remember you as? If you, I don't know, in a book, what would your book say if it had to be a book of Thando?
Oh, the Book of Thando. Ah, honestly, I actually just want the work that I do to have value, for people beyond myself. Then I would know that, you know, if the work that I do makes people live in lighter bodies, in other words, makes people feel more ease within their lives, then I'd know that I would have done something worthwhile. So yeah, it's just making sure that the work you do and the path you walk brings value to humanity. And sometimes we think that's a grandiose thing, but it's not necessarily. I think it's the decisions in what we pour ourselves into, the character that we build, and the character of the structures that we build. You know, I think that the values that you have, they also manifest themselves within structures. And so yeah, I'm just hoping that the values that I bring and the value of my work makes people's lives a little lighter.
And I'm sure you are doing that, and you've done so much for so many people. I'm sure you get a lot of feedback as well. And there's a lot of people who don't give the feedback, but they take it and they move on. So keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you're amazing. And I mean, like I said, I know I phrased it differently when I said that you're giving the voice that when you speak or when you do what you do, a lot of people relate, and like you said, they don't have the same platform, but you're there and you're speaking, so they feel like you're speaking through them, or they speaking through, or they're living through your words, or those kind of thing. So I love what you're doing. And my final question to head us out is, if I were to put you in a time machine and I were to dial it back to a time, so it's the Thando of today, right? Having walked the journey and looks like we're having. Are you there? Okay, we still there?
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Hey Thando, are you
Oh,
still there?
geez.
Can you?
Load shedding is
Okay,
such a
cool.
real thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I think load shedding is trying to give us warnings here.
I know. I can hear you just fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We were talking about your time machine,
I
and now
think
you
something's
are
happening on Thando's side.
squishy and
Maybe it's happening
granules.
on my side. You back?
That I don't know.
Thando, are you back? Are you there?
As far as I know, I haven't been gone. So I tell you, load shedding is like, it's an extreme sport. Oh my gosh, and now he's gone. Uh, oh my goodness, I think I'm going to be your host now. I'm going to be people's host. I'm going to take Lunga's job. Oh, he's not coming back. Is the tech team around? Hi, Lungs. I'm sorry. Actually, I was about to leave because I thought I've totally lost you.
Yeah, same here. Twice. It was like kicked me out twice. It's like the streamer went wrong. I was like, no, just my last question, please. And it kicked me out again. I was like, no, just my last question, please. Okay, Let's okay. Thank you for still hanging there and still being there. Are you still there, Thando?
Yes, I'm still here. I think we're having a lot of technical difficulties.
Let's do this quickly. Are you there, Thando?
Yes.
What's going on? Yeah. Ooh,
Welcome to South Africa, everybody.
I don't know.
It's no kidding.
I think
I
we're
think
probably
that
gonna
we can end it
just have to
on
end it there
a
because time will be going into load shedding soon.
yes.
Are you there?
I am here.
This
So
is
if
getting
I were
pieces.
to go back into time, and I'm guessing you're gonna ask me what I tell my younger self. Am I correct?
Please.
Oh, gee.
All right, ladies, looks like we've been experiencing some bad technical difficulties. Unfortunately, we had to let Thando go because she will be going into load shedding soon. Right now, I might be joining us soon. I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in, ladies and gents. You know how I finished. Go watch the other episodes and wrap this up. But I'm gonna leave now before they kick me out. My name is Lunga Chika. I've been your host. This is The Price of Fame. Good night.